And the reality is that most companies are only listening to the last part of the conversation, that like conversion element. They didn't listen to the awareness elements. They didn't listen to where they were considering, what FAQs were they clicking on.
You're listening to Built to Convert, the podcast where growth-minded marketers, founders, and creators come to level up. No hype, no guesswork, just bold insights that drive results. Let's go.
Hey guys, I'm Tyler Lane, founder of Session Interactive and host of Built to Convert. On this show, I sit down with growth-minded founders, marketers, and business leaders to explore how strategy, analytics, and smart marketing decisions drive real revenue-focused growth. This episode is brought to you by Session Interactive, digital marketing agency that helps brands turn complex data into clear, actionable strategy. From SEO and analytics to paid media and content, we partner with growth-focused teams to solve digital challenges and drive meaningful results. Learn more at sessioninteractive.com. All right, guys, today I'm joined with Ryan Levander. Ryan is the founder of Rednavel Consulting, a CRO and analytics consultancy that helps brands improve performance through testing, experimentation, and clarity. Ryan's perspective blends data-driven thinking with a human approach to marketing, and I'm excited to dig into how that plays into real campaigns. Ryan, welcome to the show. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. It's been a long time coming. I know we've been talking about doing something like this, and I'm glad to see you're getting this off the ground, and couldn't be happier to be one of your first guests.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I know you and I have been talking about it, and hey, let's make it happen. And Ryan, just so everyone's aware, Ryan's likely going to be a recurring guest here. We appreciate his perspective and what he's doing in the space. It's really impressive. So let's start from there. A little background, Ryan. I know you've done this many times before, but I appreciate a little origin story. How'd you get started in digital marketing? I know you have some SEO background and really pivoted into analytics and then CRO. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, totally. And for those that may not realize the Rednavel part, like that is actually my last name backwards. So it's not like the weirdest business name you've ever heard. It actually does have a little bit of significance. It's just Levander backwards. So there you go. For those who are like, what the heck kind of name is that? Rednavel? Yeah, totally. So, but yeah, I have the background story is I went to college for computer science, kind of traditional, information computer science background. So I've always been fairly, I guess, like a systems thinker, kind of technically minded. I didn't have a traditional career path after college, though. So after college, I went to college in North Carolina, kind of grew up in North Dakota, college in North Carolina, wanted to see a new part of the US. And then I was like, I got a taste of the mountains out there. So I said, let's do this Fort Collins thing. Had a buddy living there and went there for a year to gain in-state residency because I was going to do grad school there. And in the meantime, when I was working in Fort Collins, I was doing lots of kind of side gigs. I was working in a bike shop just to kind of meet some people. So I still a big mountain biker still to this day. But yeah, side gigs, I was building kind of websites for people on the side. So that was my start in like the professional earning and income kind of a thing for a living with that aspect. But I wasn't a salesperson. Like I didn't know how to, like I knew how to do the thing, but I was not good at selling the thing or like realizing my value, even though it was kind of limited at that point. It was like raw value. It wasn't like business value per se. So all that to say, I ended up working at a car dealership in like 2012, 2013. That was my first sort of like actual job. And it was honestly more social media management than it was like building their website kind of thing. And wasn't really a fan of that, but I really quickly became better at asking questions because at the bike shop, I was a sales guy. So I learned a little bit of sales skills enough to make myself better when I got the marketing job at the car dealership to be like, okay, what do you guys really care about besides just posting on Facebook and things like this? And I got into more of their back end data. And that was kind of my like entryway into really business development and not just analytics. Like, yes, analytics for their website, but also like their CRM business development that way. So, yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about, analytics in particular. Was it just web analytics before, or was it all encompassing? And then did it come into just focusing in on Google Analytics in particular? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question because it was probably 90% Google Analytics at that time. And it was for many years after that. It was basically at that point me learning universal analytics, AKA GA3, kind of back in those times when we all probably love and miss that to some degrees. But that was, me knowing the technical side of things. And so I was like, oh, why do we need to use something like Google Tag Manager when we can just code all these events and things like this? And then I'm like, oh, I understand why they build Google Tag Manager for non-developers to not annoy developers, to like give them all these tasks to do and things like that. So it was largely website analytics, and yes, via universal analytics, and because there was just so much value to deliver in that, not only in like doing things that the car dealership had not had set up, like, hey, we spent a bunch of money on this new video that's now the first thing you see on the homepage. Is anyone watching this? If they are, how long are they watching this? And after they watch it, what are they doing? Things like that, where they just never were able to answer. So a lot of things like that that enabled me to technically set that up. But then I quickly realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of like really good question asking that I need to get better at with analytics as well. It's not just yes, I can press these fancy buttons in the code. It's the quality of your questions and getting better at that, which is, I'm always getting better at that still. You're never done with that. So yeah.
I've always enjoyed that in our conversation, just really, like from you, like getting a sense and that intuitive or that inquisitive sense that you bring. Right. And that's kind of the natural fit. So talk to me about like the turning point when you're like, okay, clearly you're understanding, you've got some notoriety in the space. When did you formally establish Rednavel? And then, how did you, we're already talking about CRO to a certain extent here, but what was the kind of the first client interaction? Did you start with agencies? How did that work out?
Yeah, so it was a few years after the first time I started with the car dealership. So it was 2016 was when Rednavel was established, and the car dealership was my first client. But how that led to that was, as it kind of goes, most every year I got a kind of menial raise, nothing crazy with like you're making more money a little bit every year, kind of keeping pace with inflation for the most part. But the big turning point when this car dealership group, they managed, I think it was 6 in total other dealerships under their like parent holdings company. And I was just doing work for the one, and I was doing good work. I finally got past just the social media pieces, and they saw the other value I could provide. And so they said, hey, can you help out with these other dealerships as well too? And I was like, yeah, and then let's talk about, yes, I can do this. Let's talk about what that's going to be from a raise perspective, et cetera. And it was, I don't know, 10% or something like that. And I'm just like, if I had an agency, this would be a whole new client. I'm like, this would be a whole different game here. And it wasn't, just about the money. That was my main motivator at that point in my career, definitely. But it was also about the freedom too. Like at that point, I was living in Denver and then commuting into Longmont because that's where the car dealership was. And so it was like, and it was almost, I think it was 3 or 4 days a week. Back then it was like, I had to try really hard to get one day of like work from home kind of thing. Cause it was the funniest thing. I'd drive in, bring my own laptop and work on it. And I was like, what am I doing here? So a couple of those things was the like group of dealership offer that was just kind of not insulting, but it was just off with what my expectations were. And then it was the freedom to work where you want, when you want kind of a thing. So yeah,
a level of flexibility. Trust me. I think we're all entrepreneurs.
Grade me on my outcomes, not when I'm doing work or, kind of a thing like that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let's fast forward here. Obviously, so Rednavel's been established for quite a while now. I think you and I have talked about this a lot in the past to a certain extent in terms of paid media, right? I mean, how paid media, individuals, practitioners, agencies, what have you, are really fixated on the platform, right? Hey, I'm in AdWords, I'm in paid social, whatever. I'm optimizing the hell out of the platform. I'm excited about the platform. But talk to me about, clearly, we've all been doing this a long time. It's the individuals are so obsessed with the platform, they lack that similar obsession to the post click, right? I know obviously platforms are converting individuals in platform, but ultimately a lot of that traffic is, of course, still being driven to the website experience. Talk to me about that in terms of what you're seeing in that world, and obviously how that relates to CRO. And collaborating with those ad partners. I know you guys don't offer paid media, but you're obviously dealing with traffic that is coming to a site. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. There's always there will I think always be ways, especially with generative AI on the rise. Like I use Perplexity, and that's kind of my new Google in some capacities, not exclusively, but yeah, you can buy through them. So like you give them your credit card, and that is one vehicle. I think that will have a slight rise more and more every year. But if you're really doing user experience and conversion, like true, like actual conversion optimization, you're going to be sending people to your website at the end of the day. Like you can control everything there, whereas in an ad, you can control the copy, the creative, and that's pretty much it, right? Like when if you want to, really control that experience and control the data as well, and not just let the ad platforms only have it, then you'll send them to your site, and that's where the bigger conversion rate differences usually come from, is what you can do on your website, which is infinite. But one of the things I see with sort of like the order of operations, right, of how you usually do things is make sure your conversion tracking is set up is like step one. Like if you're going to spend any money, make sure that's set up and in all the right ways you can, right? Yeah, enhance conversions and not just the, hey, they hit this thank you page URL and in kind of a like, playing with fire kind of one where it's like, well, yeah, there's multiple ways they could get to that, et cetera. What I see is usually a pretty big miss with not just media buying agencies, any business really, is they generally think about conversions in like a one-sided way where it's more bottom of funnel conversions. And it's sort of like it'd be like only listening to the very end of this podcast conversation. It's like, well, you didn't hear my intro and you didn't hear the middle part, but you heard how I ended. So like what you're basically listening to the last part of the conversation. But then by default, you're kind of making assumptions with doing that. And so I like to measure for multiple different things across the entire user journey to really, I call it measurement marketing. I've kind of learned some of this through Chris Mercer and Measurement Marketing IO, but measure is how you listen and marketing is how you respond. And the reality is that most companies are only listening to the last part of the conversation, that like conversion element. They didn't listen to the awareness elements. They didn't listen to where they were considering, what FAQs were they clicking on, or did they even see the pricing on your page, or did they just look at the page, kind of a thing like that. So they're usually listening to a fraction of the conversation. And honestly, it's really no different than like you're at a booth in a restaurant, right? And you're kind of eavesdropping on someone a few tables away. Like you could get every third word kind of a thing. You can get a little bit of that, but you're really not getting the whole thing. Whereas if they were sitting right across from you. And so most measurement is set up like page view tag everywhere. And that's sort of like, oh, it's done. And that's their version of like eavesdropping a few tables away. Like I can kind of hear what they're saying, but I really don't know what the conversation's about. Yeah. And actually, can you hear me still, Tyler? I think you might have cut out. Okay. I got you now. Cool. Yeah. So that's usually thinking about it a little bit differently and listening to the entire conversation. I guess to summarize, it's like the user is having a conversation with your website. Most people are only listening to the last half of that.
How much are you guys doing? Because so obviously, you're agnostic in terms of channels. You're managing the traffic that's coming into a website, right? In terms of the usability and the conversion flow. So theoretically, you're tagging as many quality elements as possible. And then are you working with clients in terms of channel attribution and multi-channel attribution, things like that? Talk to me about that one.
100%. Yeah, 100%. This is probably a controversial statement. So if you're using Google Analytics 4, there's two types of attribution settings. There's data-driven and there's last click. Data-driven, a lot of people like that. It's no one knows what that is. It's machine learning and AI. And so you basically are in a black box if you're using that. That's okay if you are. I find there are more useful ways to use last click. And so I'm a fan of last click because I'm not trying to answer 6 sessions down the line. I take a more in the session level viewpoint of things. And so basically I'm like, okay, they clicked on this Facebook ad, let's say. What was the job of that Facebook ad to come to the site? And a lot of times with Facebook, it's awareness, it's earlier stage in the funnel. It's like they didn't even know your offer or your pricing. And that was the job, was to do that. If they convert, great. If it's a $5 pair of shoelaces, probably don't need a whole lot of conviction to buy those. They're probably just going to do it right away. But most of the times we're selling things that are more expensive online nowadays. And especially with economic tightening and tariffs, people are probably going to think more about things. And so you can't just assume they're going to convert on that first session. But Facebook is good at awareness and engagement, and that probably makes the retargeting audiences for future channels to be cheaper and for them to be like, yes, this is the right time now to do something like this. And so I take all that to say, I take the last click more approach of, and this is where these goal types come in very handy, and not everything can't just be about a sale. Of course, we all want that, but it's how do we get more people aware so that they can consider what you have so that they can buy.
Yep,
And most
exactly.
people think let's just run to multi-channel attribution and use tools like Triple Whale and all these tools that they're just different professional guesses. I like to say attribution is just like professional different guesses, and it really leads to less action and more confusion. I've never really seen those to be super helpful. They're hard. They really are. It's kind of like a reason for people to say, like, you know what, I don't want to think about this because it's hard to make a decision on this. I'm just going to use Triple Whale or something like this and just call it good, and Wicked Reports, kind of thing, and just outsource my thinking to a tool, and that's where trouble happens.
Sure,
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
All right, scenario here. All right, you're onboarding a new client, and one of the first deliverables, of course, is analyzing and assessing their analytics instance. I probably know the answer to this already, but I'm curious, like, what are some of the main issues you see right away within majority of analytics instances? Again, I know it's from SMBs to enterprise. Are there core themes that you see established? Obviously, conversions are one of those, making sure those are correct. But what else do you see typically?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think this is true. This has happened with a client a few weeks ago. It's true for big companies that are super sophisticated and even have like in-house data scientists. I've worked with those before, or a startup where it's like you are the marketing, that kind of a scenario. They generally either skip entirely or don't spend enough time on the initial phase. I call it the discovery phase. What questions are we trying to have answered is that first part of that, of like, what do you care about? And I like to kind of be careful of my words here, because if they're not super sophisticated, I like to say, well, what's the vision for the company? What are your goals? And I don't want to get into like, what are your key events? Because that's a little bit nerdy, and I'll translate that kind of thing. Just keep it business speak kind of a thing. So it's like, what's your vision for that? Then you can establish where are they at now in relation to that. And then you kind of have this like scope between where you are and where you want to get to. That's the first step that's usually skipped, and they're never written down. Usually it's just like, we had a meeting and they exist in the ethos with probably an AI tool, but they're not in a central, I usually have a data dictionary Google sheet where it's like, here's all the questions that, then if here, this is the person that asked this question, because then you can say, when you ask this question, is this what you wanted to see from like an end report standpoint, just to make sure you're clear on something like that. But then the second thing is usually they don't go through the core user flows of the site. Like go in your analytics tool of choice, look at the top landing pages, and then look to understand, okay, from this landing page, what are the CTAs in the page? Like, what are we, not in the navigation, but like front and center in the page? And then go follow through to see if they're actually doing those things. I'm a huge fan of mapping that out in a tool like Miro or Lucidchart, just so you're clear on like, okay, this is the first URL funnel, just box, funnel link, step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's easier for ecom because it's more linear, but it's still important to do for lead gen and SaaS. And then you can really easily just visualize that and say, where are they falling off at? I mean, it's the simplest thing, but almost no one does that, like establishing of this is sort of this visual funnel. I'm a pretty visual person, so it's nice to just see like, and put it in Looker Studio. Maybe, just put little scorecards. Don't have to make it fancy, just little boxes, kind of a thing. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to hear your take, Tyler. Is that something you guys see as well? And those kind of skimping on discovery and not really doing a lot of planning and kind of running to set up goals? Is that common? Or?
Yeah, I know. I mean, how a lot of different takes here. I mean, first of all, there's always a litany of issues within an analytics instance. And I think the big thing, with GA3 and obviously with GA4, there's still a ton of bells and whistles, right? I think the big thing is like, we could go in there and recommend all of those fix this or add this. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like they only need a subset that are really valuable to them. And it's just like, it's asking those questions, Ryan, of like, how is this going to benefit? And we're asking this to ourselves too, is like, how is this going to benefit this individual, these group of individuals in their day to day? Right. It's like, we can spin up a fancy report. We can get data as clean as possible, but ultimately, how is it going to augment? How is it going to supplement or make them, allow them to make better decisions? Right. And that does, a lot of that conversion data for sure, or the funnel component. I always think back to GA3 and how they had the funnel visualization and never was that great. Right. It wasn't a great tool. Right. And now we customize a lot of that using Looker, just to see the flow, and that's getting better and better. But yeah, so those are the core items typically. And we want to be honest. And I think, you share that same vein. It's like honest and transparent with clients around your, based on our discovery, based on what we've learned about your ICP, about your product, service, these are the core elements that make sense. Yes, we can go crazy, but is that at the end of the day helpful and supportive for you? Probably not. So
yeah, 100%. And I think that's invaluable too, because early in my career, I would I wasn't like feeling like I was a know-it-all, but I was just like, oh yeah, like I know how to do the, like technically I know how to press the buttons kind of thing. And I thought that's what clients wanted, but I skipped or either didn't spend enough time on those discovery phases, because I heard this quote somewhere where it's like, when you say something, it means something. When a client says something, it means everything. So then you can kind of loop back. It's like, hey, based on what you told me about your business goals, that's why I did this extra work, or just I set this up this way in GA4 so that we have a clear vision to get to that, extra 2 million in revenue this year, or however that lead ladders up to the ultimate goal. But that's what we're doing it for, obviously, kind of a thing. So yeah.
Ryan, how about kind of your selling strategy? What we've found, right? We offer analytics, obviously, paid media and SEO, and we found like clients are really excited about the lead generation opportunities, right? Those particular channels, and it varies based on the size of the client, but typically clients don't have a specific analytics line item, right? And what we found, and we kind of take a note out of your book here, is instead of just trying to outline an analytics retainer, which they definitely need, we have to correlate that with some level of CRO, some level of implementation. Right. A lot of clients are thinking like, oh, I signed up for SEO, so I'm going to get your full suite of analytics too. And it's like, you're going to get support 100%, and we're going to be flexible with you. But no, you didn't sign up for that particular, not line item, but that support level. And talk to me about that and how you're able to convince clients that it's of extreme importance. So they're essentially working with an agency or an internal team on managing those lead gen channels, but then they're working with you to help fully optimize the funnel, report, and successful attribution methods.
Yeah, it's a really great question, because it seems like, especially again, like I mentioned, like a tighter economy, right? It's like, oh, my analytics, like my media buying agency does that. And in some scenarios, it's like, yeah, they do all you need, because you don't, like you're at this phase of your business. And in some cases, like that's all you need. Like, I'm not going to sell you something you don't need. So I really take a consultative approach to sales, because I really want to understand how they are dealing with optimization. And so I don't do analytics just because I like to nerd out and create a bunch of reports. It's like, earlier in like year 1 and 2, I was like more of the CRO agency. But what I found is that so many people, first ones to sign up for CRO, because it means we're going to test everything, or kind of so they rethink that, right? And then we're going to drive growth, and that's what it should do. But no one had the analytics in place to realize what should they optimize. And so it's like, what are we optimizing here? Like, what are the, like, I always kind of like was joking about like, we do conversion rate optimization, but like, which conversion rate are you talking about? There's hundreds across the user journey, so it's like, which one? You don't have the setup. We need to establish that. And I really like to understand, this is usually the thing where I try to get the prospect before we're engaging to show me what their process is for optimization. If it works for them, if they have some kind of a prioritization framework, if they've set up analytics in a way where they can show me, it's like, yeah, we're like basically mapped out the user journey and we're setting expectations and testing against those, then like, fantastic. most people haven't done the necessary analytics to be able to know what to optimize. And I think the other biggest miss is that they think analytics is the only form of research they need to do. And they think that CRO is analytics, like meaning like you can do analytics in a really deep and customized way. And that's all you need to do in order to come up with quote unquote good test ideas. And that couldn't be more from that couldn't be more wrong. You need to do qualitative research. Like that's where good test ideas come from. It's not like CRO agencies are like magicians or palm readers. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, yes, there's best practices, but that's very idiosyncratic of like, well, isn't that the whole like best practices for this business? But what happens when you do something like that? And I just, at the end of the day, like what I like to do for companies is be a relentless advocate of their customers. And so the person who knows the customer the most is going to win and who can design a test based on what we know about them. And so there has to be an element of qualitative research. And I see product teams are good at this when we've tested with some product teams before, and it's part of their job, I think, more so to do user research, but marketing teams are pretty bad at that. They think that analytics is just going to do it all.
Do it all. Yeah. We talked about it briefly, and obviously it's still, I don't know, we're a few years in at this point on GA4, and a lot of frustration, trepidation, intimidation, lamenting about the platform. And we've seen on our end, clients considering alternatives. Are you seeing that too? Heap, we're starting to use others as well within the analytics side. What other tools are you seeing there? And are you recommending clients fixate on GA still as a baseline? Are you entertaining those other platforms? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's a good call out because, yeah, it is the UX of GA4, I think, is objectively worse than UA. I think we can all agree on like that because people say it's bad. And I like to dig down, like, tell me more about what you mean by it. Usually when I ask that question, the follow up response is the UX of GA4, the end result.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes sense because most people were just used to using UA. I think very few would use Looker Studio, previously known as Google Data Studio, but now more people probably have to use that. And it's more work to do in order to get something that's easy to understand and useful. I continue to just use GA4 because I've never been able to not do something with it. And until I'm not able to do something for a client, there's no reason to invest time and money into something else. And so that's what we use internally. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Also, I mean, obviously Google has a very unfair advantage with their platform and ecosystem. So to do things like match up different devices, which of course is popular nowadays for sites where you don't have to log into, that's really hard to do, like near impossible. And so Google is going to do a much better job of that than anyone else. And so I'd rather stick with someone like that where it's just easier to match up that stuff. But there are some other tools out there. I strongly recommend Microsoft Clarity. It's not a replacement for GA4. It's very much like a different way to look at behavioral analytics, heat maps, video recordings, a little bit of generative AI, answer some questions for user journeys. That's nice to use. Very nice for navigation without, having to set up click events. You could just see in navigation what people are using. I've been experimenting with PostHog. It's more of a developer-centric tool, but I really like the fact that it has the video recordings built into that. So I could build a funnel and say how many people. I was showing my example the other day, and I'm just like, yeah, I have like 20 users on my site. So hopefully some of these did something good. I can see the conversions, but like went from the homepage and filled out a form. I could say, okay, these 6 people did that. I can immediately just look at those video recordings in that tool without having to like make GA4 talk to Microsoft Clarity. So it's just a little bit easier. It's just another, again, layer on top of GA4. It's not like it's a replacement for that. But yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I follow this framework of like plan, build, launch, forecast, and optimize, sort of this measurement marketing framework. So it's really agnostic of whatever tool you're using. And again, it all centers on what questions are we trying to have answered. And I think the thing that people miss most about those questions, they'll kind of like say, oh yeah, we want to track purchases. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you do it for e-commerce, but what are those buy questions? What are those purchases by product, purchases by new versus return user, purchases by user type? Maybe they had to log in to buy, purchases by coupon code. There's all those questions that you have to be very cognizant of when you are setting up the tracking, that it's not just this in a silo at a certain point in time. event name, there's lots of parameters and other things. It's like this would be very useful to know all these things as well too, and not just this one thing in a silo. So yeah.
Oftentimes, and we're still getting this, I know you are too, it's just like the power of GA4 is, or the issues of GA4 around usability, right? We just discussed that, but break down what you guys are doing from the data lake perspective using BigQuery, and what fun things you're doing with that to supercharge Looker, those reports, and to gain deeper insights on the user.
Yeah, it's a good call out because I mean, BigQuery is like it's a next level of analytics, and it's very, I don't think marketers should spend time learning BigQuery. So spoiler on that, not spoiler, but like sort of a warning on that. It is very complex. And honestly, there's certain circumstances where you just kind of have to use BigQuery. So if you need to do like year over year analysis, like if you wanted to compare Q1 of 2024 compared to Q1 of 2025, you couldn't do that at this point with GA4 because is it 16 months, 14 months, something like that. So you're going to get, throttled basically, like you only can collect so much data. So you can't do some things like that. You can't, if you wanted to build your own attribution model, first click versus, you couldn't do that. You'd have to use BigQuery. I think you should absolutely set up the BigQuery link between GA4, just set it up immediately because it starts basically when you set it up. It'll probably cost you $10 a year for the storage costs of BigQuery. So it's basically free. It will cost more if you actually want to query and use it, but you're not there yet. Just set it up so you're one and done, and then focus on getting a lot of value out of GA4 because there's so much value to get out of that. I personally am not a big fan of the standard reports. Like when you first log into GA4, you'll probably get acquainted with those reports. Yep. I think you'll pretty quickly get into those Explore reports, aka the custom reports, where I'm using funnels all the time back there, where you just define steps and whether it's a URL or an event name, and then again, kind of going back to that. What were they supposed to do when they came to this page? How many came here? What was the button in the hero section? Okay, how many people saw that? How many people saw it and clicked it? And just sort of build these steps here. And you could do things like an open funnel versus a closed funnel, which is closed is going to be probably more for your e-commerce sites that are more linear. Whereas if you're SaaS or lead gen, you probably have to have more open because there's a little less of a direct response style funnel kind of a thing. But there's a ton of value to get out of GA4. And if you really don't like the charts in there, which I hear that those are pretty limited as well, then Looker Studio, previously Google Data Studio, is free, and you can have more charts in there than you can ever know what to do with. And you could just connect GA4. I think the big tip with that, because I've seen reports where you've probably seen these too, Tyler, where you see like 50 different charts on a page and it starts to load really slow. So the tip there is pages are free, charts are not. Technically, they're not free. I think you could make 100, but no one's going to make 100 pages. So use more pages. And if you have to start scrolling too much on a page in Looker Studio, stop building and make a new page in Looker Studio, because that every time you create more, it requeries the APIs in that report. And that's where you run into trouble, basically.
Nice. So yeah. Good insight. Really good tips there. Obviously we're probably going now just in terms of the AI components, and it's been a huge topic over the last few years, and in particular around in marketing, of course, and how it's working with content generation, how it's working with analyzing data, certain things like that, and helping to augment. How are you guys using AI specifically on the automation front, on the data analysis front? What tools are you using? Yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's it could be a whole episode for sure on something like this, but
we'll keep it going. Yeah, here, I promise. Yeah,
yeah, it'll probably be our next one, right? Yeah, it's fine. I just wrote an article for Convert about this, probably coming out soon here. Awesome. I don't think it's live yet, but it's the kind of the concept was using generative AI for data, not really data analysts per se, more data. And the person who sets up your data collection in Tag Manager, I think that they have an unfair advantage. Like there's more value using generative AI for those use cases than potentially content creation, just because obviously content creation, there's always some level of subjectivity with it of like, is this good? Is this my voice? Well, there's always different people grading and judging that. But if you've established, again, going back to your good questions with your project charter of like, we've done discovery. We know that these are the 10 questions we want to have answered. But, they're all but one are set up already in Tag Manager. So I need to set up 9 more. I'm going into GTM, and you can use Google Tag Manager is what GTM stands for. And you can use preview mode in Google Tag Manager, and you can make sure it's perfect. You could look at what the data will be like before you publish it and say, this is actually going to go to GA4. So in generative AI, like I have a technical background, so I'm going to be better than most, but you really don't have, like, you have to know just how to use basically JavaScript is the main language. I would say JavaScript and a little bit of CSS and Tag Manager. But if you understand that you could write custom JavaScript in Tag Manager, and I'm sending screenshots over to your favorite tool of choice for LLMs, you could be like, and a lot of people are like, well, it didn't work well. Well, like, okay, it gave you an error code. So then send that back to your, ChatGPT or whatever you're using, and then tell it what it got wrong and tell it to get it right. And you don't have to publish anything until it's actually, and what you can even do is you don't even have to like, because it can be a work to like change a lot of things in Tag Manager, whatever you're doing. You could just test in the console log in Chrome DevTools and be like, I'm just going to test here until it gives me the value that is exactly what I want. And then you can go ahead and just use that JavaScript in Tag Manager. And it's incredibly powerful. So that's just one element, is how it relates more to the analytics setups are faster, and we're able to do kind of more complex things quicker. One example is I used to have a little bit of background in SEO, so I like to get better metrics besides just the page views kind of a thing from a piece of content. So we'll grab the word count of a blog, we'll pass that through. We'll grab the last updated date, usually not visible, usually in the data layer somewhere. We'll grab when it was last published, and we'll calculate a difference between those two. And then in Looker Studio, we're like, this is probably due for a refresh because it gets it's fading in traffic and it hasn't been updated for a year. So it's kind of an obvious. So some of those things where it may not even be visible on the page, but we're kind of thinking through a little bit of like, how might this be beneficial for the end user, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I love that. It's amazing how many people are so reliant on paid SEO tools that do a lot of that, but there's so many applications using some basic frameworks with Google Sheets, OpenAI, other tools to extract that data very quickly and then implement it or integrate it perhaps like within Looker or a data visualization tool of your choice. You and I are both, switching gears here a little bit, you and I are both pretty active on LinkedIn. I know a lot of AI pundits are, hey, this is the prompt, that all you need. This is the prompt that will save you from having to work with a CRO agency, for example. This is all you need. Deep research does it all. What should people be not aware of, but skeptical of when utilizing, let's say, ChatGPT or another LLM for some of their initial CRO thoughts and ideas? Because I know a lot of them are obviously people are testing it and people are getting insights out of those. We've tested those. We've got our own opinions. I want to hear your thoughts when we think just a prompt is gonna fix it for them, right?
Yeah, it feels like a huge unlock to people who are just not, either they haven't done CRO before, or they just everyone wants to test, and I mean that's how we made a man land on the moon and developed vaccines. It's obviously through the scientific method and through testing. So it's a thing to strive for. And why don't we apply more of this logic to businesses? And so it's a compelling thought that AI can help, and it can help on the ideation front. It's almost a little bit paralyzing because it's like, well, now I have literally limitless ideas like we always probably did if we did the proper research, but now it's just a click away. So it's there, but it's generally a misunderstanding of what sort of CRO is entailed. And I like to use the word more experimentation because obviously it's like, well, again, like what conversion rate are you optimizing for? It's all of them, but it's taking a more experimentation approach. But at the end of the day, it's LLMs get knowledge of what's out there on the internet. And again, at the end of the day, great CRO and in terms of the research process is about being a relentless advocate of the customer. And so, the research element is one form of research. There's really good, actual AI tools out there too for actual published, like actual scientific studies where it's like, we tested social proof across, 40 different industries. And this was the like actual scientific research. That's probably more trustworthy than just sort of like what AI spits back because it's cited. But all that research should go into, we use Airtable as an example to have it all in one spot. So it's like, okay, here's research, here's our analytics research, here's user interviews, here's some ChatGPT stuff, here's all this stuff. And based on all this research, we sort of have this prioritization framework where it's like, well, okay, what do we test first? Because we can't just keep saying, let's make the CMO happy and test whatever he says or she says. Like, it has to be a little bit more sophisticated than that, and probably a little bit more sophisticated than like just the typical ice or pie or something like that. So we kind of take this evidence-based framework, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, based on all the research we have, unique sources, different sources of research, we should probably test this thing first. And I think marketers should practice more on writing a hypothesis out, because most of the times it's either not being done at all, or it's sort of like summarizing results, or there's the result isn't in the hypothesis, but it's a simple if this then framework, but it just really is never done that well. And it's the whole basis for, did this work or not? And if that's not being done well, then that's how testing programs fizzle quickly, is when you don't slow down on those things initially so that you can speed up later on with the actual results of that. So it's a great way to get more ideas, I think. But at the end of the day, you still have to probably code that test. Like, you're not just WYSIWYGing your test. If you do, then good luck. Hopefully that doesn't break, kind of a thing. We really don't do much of that, because also we want to send through analytical events of like, not just were they in the test, like did they actually see the test when they did click into this and all those different things. So it should help on some aspects of CRO, but it's absolutely at the end of the day, you're making decisions with this data. It's harder to like just sign off on that completely, obviously. Sure. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think, everyone loves the immediate gratification of, hey,
right,
just write the word prompt, I'll send you everything and you'll be good to go. It's just, obviously it takes a lot more than that. Testing, iteration, knowledge of your ICP, a lot of
statistics of how long should we be running this. I mean, that's a whole, I could be, the tool said we, or like I use Unbounce, and one time I was working with an agency, like, yeah, we run tests every 2 weeks. Like, so all the tests take 2 weeks. They're like, yeah, it's just a routine. Like there's no statistical planning of just like, oh, well, this one could be 5 days. This one could be 5 months. Like, where's that? Yeah. It was just a schedule, so we're just going to do it, keep it flowing out. So it was funny.
Ryan, what's talk to me about a recent case study or a success you've had with a client, and, how you came to be involved with that client. Ultimately, how did you identify the issue and the priority, and then what were some of the results? I'm curious.
Yeah, one that comes to mind, it was an easier win. We don't always come across these, but it kind of came from this listening to the entire customer journey. So it was a kind of a direct to consumer kind of health client, and still working with them today, and realized that they had a pretty big budget for media buying, and generally largely Facebook. So it was probably around 70, 80K a month on ads. So quite a bit, sending to generally a landing page that was a sign up page. And they were using a third-party form tool for their sign up form. So it was like a regular Webflow site, and then the third-party tool was the form itself. That form tool was taking way too long from like an API perspective, yada, yada. It was taking 8 seconds for that actual form to show up when they got there. And it was all basically mobile traffic. And so not everyone's on Wi-Fi. So I did some calculations on like monetizing the situation. So basically, I think it was around 35, almost half of that 35,000 per month of that ad budget was wasted, because based on the analytics I then set up to say, okay, we know how many people land on this page, but how many people actually wait till the form shows? We did like an element visibility to like make sure we pass that through to GA4 to say, when does the form actually show? And like, I think it was like a 40% drop off. People are just bailing because they're on the phone. They're like, I must be on the wrong page. I'm not going to wait around. Like I'm out of here. And not only was the form complex, and we redesigned the form for them from a testing perspective, but just the sheer fact that it was taking so long to load. So it was just like, I paid for myself easily for years because it was like, fix this like immediately. And it was just the fact of listening of like, again, and this was not really not like pointing fingers at the media agency, because they have a ton of things to update on the ad creative side of things, but it's like they set up the conversion tracking and they set up the page view tag, and that's all they did. And it was like, well, what's happening to these people? They're so like, it was like 5,000 people a day were hitting this forum. I'm like, how do we only have 80 submissions? Like, what's going on? Like, what's where the conversation where it's lost in the conversation? And so that's what led me to set up more of the detailed view and realize that, yeah, it was most people were bailing because they weren't waiting around. It's the equivalent of like going into a car dealership and like, oh yeah, isn't this the shoe store? And like, oh no, they moved down the street, and like you would treat them differently. It's like, it's the same. Like, no, they're wrong store totally. Like, yeah. So it was just or going to a store and you like go in the back. That was the analogy, a better one. Like you go into a store and you like go around the back door, and all the people in there are just like, why aren't anyone coming in? And it's like, dude, the door's locked in front. Didn't you realize that? Like, and they thought it was open, but it's just like, dude, I had to go around the door. Your door's locked. What are you doing? And that was kind of a similar scenario, So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing because we know that there's millions and millions, probably billions of wasted media spend that are based on maybe fairly simplistic to obviously some advanced techniques that are really associated with CRO. Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. And I know you and I will catch up separately. Where can people get in touch? Where are you active? I know you're in the conference space quite a bit too. Where are you speaking next? Give us an overview there.
Yeah, kind of taking not quite a full year off for speaking wise, but just less of it's been a busy last couple of years with that stuff. And so not as much planned this year, but yeah, rednavelconsulting.com is our site there. You can go check things out. It's going to be getting a little bit of a facelift in the next month, I would say. So check it now, check it later. It might be a little bit different, but I would love to take a look at that and then connect with me on LinkedIn. Just Ryan Levander should have a unique enough last name to find me on LinkedIn. I'd appreciate a connection request. I'll accept them all. And if you want to drop me a note, it might be a little easier to figure out this one's legit versus this one's trying to sell me something kind of thing. So
yeah, Ryan's incredibly active on LinkedIn. Got a great perspective. And then as I mentioned, attends quite a few conferences. So be on the lookout. Ryan, thanks so much. Great to see you. We'll be in touch.
Thanks a lot, Tyler. This was great. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks for listening to Built to Convert. If you're serious about growth, don't just listen. Subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for new episodes that drop straight into your feed. Until next time, keep building.